Well, now that we've gotten all of our basic lesson formats ready to go, they still have quite a bit to do to finish up the primer manuscript. And so we're just going to go through now some of those pieces that just the little fiddly bits, I call them, the things that make the primer complete. So I'm looking in your primer construction guide on page 92 if you want to go there. And it's fine. And so we're just going to be taking a look, just kind of going through there. This is just more just kind of reminding you of those things that you're going to have to do. So the first thing we want to talk, and a lot of these things are, some of the captions and headings and things are found in the small items list of the things that were supposed to be translated before the primer workshop, and that's why it's very important that you have this, so that you as a facilitator can go through and be putting these pieces in the primer without disturbing the team all the time to get a translation. So our first thing we're going to look at is the outside front cover of our book, and we're going to have a title, and so you want a title that is kind of emotive for the area, the people, and something that will kind of draw them into the material. And then we talked about in the illustrations having a cover drawing. And so some of the titles I know that are in there is the journey to reading, the tree of knowledge, the path to reading, learning to read and write. Just some various things that might be. And then down here we have the caption, Adult Literacy Primers with Bible Content to Teach Reading and Writing. And so that's been pre-translated, and so then you want to go find that caption in your captions and headings and just insert it on the front cover of your primer. And then right inside the front cover, we're going to have how the letters are written. And this is not going to be alphabetical order, but this is the order in which they're introduced into the primer. And so just kind of draw some lines, and then as the lessons are completed, just you go in and insert those letters in the correct order. Once again, you don't have to worry about the arrows because your desktop publisher should have an arrow font to do those. Okay, then we go to our title page. And we'll have our title repeated here. And then in caption 4 of the word for authors, assisted by, artwork by, and then you're going to get the names of the people who are writing the primer. Usually assisted by, it would be the LEI facilitators or others that have helped that aren't the language speakers that would be there. And then if you have a local artist doing the artwork, put that there. Book 1, lessons 1 to 30. Of course, on book 2, you would have the same thing, but book 2, and this would be lessons 31 to 82 of our normal book. The introduction of letters in book 1 are as follows. Once again, that's your caption and heading. Then, as you've been making your letter chart about what letters are introduced in which lesson, so now you'll just have a listing of 1 to 30. And you'll put in there which letters you are introducing in which lessons. If there's no new letters, you can just put a little line to show that it's a revision lesson. Then you want the words in that language for capital letters to go here. And you'll get published by, printed by, then copyright Literacy and Evangelism International. And then if there's a joint copyright, then you would put that there. And then after the title page, we have the preface, and that's been pre-translated. And so you would just kind of note where that goes and make sure that that copy gets to your desktop publisher. So this is a sample, so a table that shows you where these captions and headings go in the primer. And so once you have them in your book, then you can put them in the appropriate place. And also in our slides, we have the rules for successful teaching, and that's going to go next in the primer, the next page after the preface. And then we start our teaching guide, and this you'll have as a separate document. It's been pre-translated, and we'll have another video where we talk about how to fill that in and get that ready to go. And then your desktop publisher will take the digital copy of that and put it into the primer manuscript. And we have our pre-reading and the instructions for the pre-reading. The first part of the pre-reading should be in your small items. You want to take those in, and you want to make sure that you put the symbols in the appropriate place in the translated material. And then for box 5 through 8 on the second part of the pre-reading, you're going to have to go in and actually put in the material in those boxes. So here's an example of the pre-reading. So these would be blank when you get the format. So you're going to go in, and the first box 5, you're going to choose 3 of the vowels that are in the language. We usually try and choose ones that look fairly different. Box 6, you're going to pick 3 words, 3-letter words that are in the language that look very different in their footprint. We talked about the footprint before. So this one would be, like, Khan is here. Ani has a little bit of a bump on the end. Ito has this bigger bump here, and then slow. And then you're just going to take those and basically you kind of pattern them. So you just take this one to the end, and then you have A, E, A, and then just take this one to the end and go that way. Take this one to the end. So you can see how the patterning goes there. In the 7th set of boxes, we take syllables, that two-letter syllables that are in the language, and we want them to begin with the same letter. This is beginning to get a little harder for the new reader. And once again, you just take 3 of the vowels and then you pattern those as indicated here. So you'll have all this in your primer guide to go back and refer to. Then for the 8th set of boxes, you're going to try and find 4 words in the language that look as much alike as possible. You can see here, all of these start with A. They all have an N in them, and they all have a K in them. And so they look very, very similar. So this is going to make it even more difficult for the new reader, just practicing to train their eye on that left to right, top to bottom reading motion before they go to lesson 1. So get all that in, and then on the how to teach this part that goes on the left-hand side of the page, you need to make sure you put in the information that you filled in here to go for the instructions. Then after that comes the 5 steps condensed, and we'll be talking about filling that in when we talk about the teaching guide and the writing instructions for lesson 1. Now, in the back of the primer 1, we have the word cards, the sample word cards for the teacher to either use or look at to see how to make their word cards. And so if you're using the template that Patty's put together, so on the left-hand side of the page will be the instructions for making the word cards. That's in your small items. And then you're going to start on the outside and start with the words from lesson 1 and write those in. So here's our 4 words from lesson 1. And then several of the other syllables that are taught. So you're going to do this for each lesson, write it down, starting at the right-hand side, and then move on in. And this is the teacher's going to cut them out. They're going to cut out on the edge, and then they can go on in. Then on the back side of that, you're going to need to write the lesson number. So like when you flip the page over, then the lesson number corresponding to that word will be on the back. So you have to be a little careful because it's easy to get out of sync if you're not careful and get the wrong lesson number with the wrong word. Okay, also in book 1, in the very back, we have a listing of the new words and the syllables that are taught in each lesson. And this is something you can keep on top of as you go through each lesson. Make sure you write in the new words and the syllables that are in those words. So like down here, we've already taught the knee up in lesson 1. So we don't add it to our syllables here, but we just add the syllables that are new in that lesson. And that helps the teacher when they're planning some of the extra parts of the lesson. And then we want to have a syllable chart that will go in the back of lesson 1, book 1. And here you have for the student to review, study constantly. There's none of our captions. And then you just make a basic syllable chart here and fill it in. And then you need to make sure that the team goes over this. If there's any syllables that are bad words or don't appear in the language, then you just remove those and you don't have to have them there. All right. So the inside back cover is where that syllable drill is going to go. And on the outside back cover, you're going to have the alphabet as it appears. And some places want cursive as well as manuscript. Most places we just do the manuscript alphabet, the printed alphabet. And then we also put from our small items a request for feedback, maybe the Beatitudes or address where the books can be obtained. And then that's it for the back cover. So book 2, we have the same things as for book 1. The outside front cover is the same, except you put the number 2 where you've had 1. Inside front cover, you may still have a few individual letters that you're teaching. If so, put those in there. Otherwise, you might put another kind of syllable drill or some scripture verses. The title page, this is going to be a little bit more involved. We have lessons 31 to 82 and the introduction of letters in book 2. And here we have lessons 31 and 32 where we're just including our the other new letters in the rest of the stories that the writers have written. Then you need to make sure you get a wording for numbers and letters. And then from 35 to 46 are the health and farming stories. And so these are just suggested. So you want to take the title from those stories and put them here. If it's too long, then find a way to just get 1 or 2 words that kind of give an idea of what that story is about. And then we go into lesson 47, the Bible stories. And once again, you just want something very simple in terms of what the lesson's about. You may not be able to put the full title, but so you go through and work with the team to make sure you can put in some ideas, but then they need to approve them. They are published by, printed by. And then after we finish the farming and health stories, we're going to have 2 pages that are blank. The one on the left, we're going to put a syllable drill. Sometimes if you have closed syllables in the language, it's nice to put together kind of practice for the students, maybe picking all the syllables that have been introduced so far in words that end in certain endings or something like that for them to practice with. And then on the right-hand side of the page, it's going to be how to teach the Bible stories is going to go on that side. Easy to read Bible stories. And here's a place where it shows some of the scriptures that you can include and some of the places you could include them. So easy to read Bible story instructions, as we said. You can also include some hymns and choruses if there's some blank pages in the back. And then on the inside back cover of book 2, and maybe some scriptures that are there. And the outside back cover is going to be similar to book 1 with the alphabet listed. So those are all the little pieces that are in the primer. And then on page 107, and there's that layout for the primer we talked about earlier. But here's a checklist of all the things you need to go through to make sure that you've got in the primer, make sure the team has gone over everything that you've done in the formatting, in case there's anything they catch that's not correct. Maybe you've broken down a word wrong, or a syllable that you have broken out has a bad meaning, or is a taboo word that you don't want to use. Make sure that read over the stories and that the punctuation is accurate and correct. So anyways, just all kinds of things to look through, and there's just a list of those that you can go through. And so that's all on this part of completing the primer manuscript, and we'll be looking at the specifics of the teaching guide and the 5 steps condensed in another video.